Can you tell me about a product you think is a bad experience and why it's poorly designed? Hey everyone, I'm Selena. I'm here with another Exponent mock interview. Today I'm with Nikita and we'll be doing a product design interview. Nikita, do you mind introducing yourself a bit?
Sure. Thanks for the intro, Selena. I'm Nikita. I've been at Google for 5 years. Previously was in marketing. I'm now currently a PM at Google.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction. So let's just dive right into it. The question I had for you today is, can you tell me about a product you think is a bad experience and why it's poorly designed?
Just one clarifying question I have. When you mentioned a product, this can be any product, like physical products, apps. Let me know if there's any limitations to consider.
Yeah, it can be any product.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to be taking notes on my computer, if that's okay, just to kind of frame my thoughts. I'm just going to take a second to kind of think about, I think maybe a product that, or products generally, like what I think is a good experience, and that'll probably help me kind of narrow into on a product that I think does the opposite of that. So I'm just going to take a second to think about that. Okay, when I think generally about like products that I do like, I think they kind of have two main components within it. Like one is like that they're simple and easy to use. And I think the second is they create like some type of a positive habit for the users, whether it's like something that allows the users to, improve their lives in some way. But I know like sometimes when you think about social media apps, they get a lot of negative press about, like potentially leading to depression or things like that. So that's kind of something that I always keep in mind about products that I think are good experiences for users. Now, when I think about a product I think does the opposite of that. I think personally one that I have been using is called MyFitnessPal. I'm not sure if you've used it, but I can give a quick introduction as to what it is.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Awesome. It's so MyFitnessPal essentially is an app that allows you to track your food and your eating habits and nutrition. Essentially, you can add all the foods that you eat in a day, and you can kind of see kind of like what is the percent that's like in the different macros, like carbohydrates, protein, fats, all that. So it kind of helps you get towards like a fitness goal. Like for me, potentially I wanted like get more into strength, so definitely have to eat a certain way to get there. So this app, I don't think it's the best experience because I think one, from the user's perspective, I say it's not simple and easy to use. In fact, I find it quite manual. So that's kind of like the first thing that I find about this product is that you have to manually enter all these foods, and it takes a lot of time, and kind of being on a health journey is hard enough. And like the fact that this adds kind of more friction is just a bit frustrating. I think the second thing that I think is kind of a poor experience about it is that there's not enough, I think, education behind how to use the app effectively. And I think this can be quite dangerous, especially something related to your health. Like potentially you might not be like tagging it correctly. You might be overeating, undereating in a way. So I think that's something to consider is like there's not enough education, the danger with that. I think the third aspect of it that creates a poor experience is the fact that I don't know if the app kind of takes diversity and inclusiveness into account as much as it could. For instance, when I look at a lot of the recipes on there, they're mostly like foods that are more American, you could say. And so I think someone coming from other backgrounds, like they might find it difficult to find like Indian foods, Indian cuisine foods, or other ethnic cuisines. So that's something that kind of noticed, and I think could be improved potentially.
Gotcha. Cool. That makes sense. I'm following so far. Now, let's say you're a PM for this product. How would you go about improving some of those things?
Okay, so if I was a PM on MyFitnessPal, what would I kind of do next? I think, let me think of any clarifying questions before I kind of dive deep into, like the users and pain points and all the solutions. I think the first question I kind of want to make sure to align on is kind of like if there's any time or monetary constraints to be taken to take account for this, given I'm not currently at MyFitnessPal, I'm at Google. I know Google budget is definitely different from a budget at a company that's much smaller. So let me know if there's any constraints I should be concerned of, or otherwise I'll probably think of some reasonable and some out of box solutions.
Yeah, let's say in terms of like time or resource constraints, let's say you have like a 6-month period to think about the problem.
Okay. Awesome. So 6 months period, and then I'll probably come up with a range of solutions then, depending on budget wise. And I think the only second clarifying question I have is around the market. Right now, I'm thinking of focusing on the US market. I believe that's where the app has the most penetration and like the most usage of MyFitnessPal. I do know, like, at least being at Google, that, you know, sometimes we have like NBU efforts and efforts like to really reach other markets and developing markets. But I feel like given that the existing product has pain points in its top market, we might want to focus there first. And I think it might have less constraints that we have to work with. Let me know if you think that works.
Got it. No, that makes sense.
Okay, perfect. So I think to help me kind of like organize my thoughts a bit, I'm probably going to take a second to think about, you know, the user journey, pain points and solutions. But even before getting there, I think it's important that we kind of like align on maybe a North Star metric. And when I think about like a metric that is like a metric that's going to be powerful, like I think it's important to take into account the long-term growth and benefit for the users. So I know sometimes, you know, goals like internally could be like revenue goals, but I do think that sometimes starting off with maybe something around engagement might be better in this scenario, because we're finding the experience of the user, like there's a lot of friction points. And so when we think about creating an engaging experience, one where the user wants to return, I think that might benefit us more in the long run and benefit the user. So let me know if you think if we can kind of have an overall engagement goal kind of to frame this.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, especially since health is a long-term goal, it makes sense to focus on engagement.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like we want to be part of their whole journey. Perfect. Okay. So then I'm just going to take a second to kind of think about, I know we identified some like bad experiences earlier of MyFitnessPal, but I think it's important to think about, you know, who is the actual user. I think like I might not be the main user of MyFitnessPal. We might have a persona that is like, that we need to think about their needs. So I might take a second to just think about a couple personas and kind of run it by you after that, if that works.
Cool.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I think there are kind of 3 personas I am thinking of just based off of my own experience and knowledge of MyFitnessPal. I think ideally, like, we'd want to do like user research to kind of segment to see, you know, who are the actual main users. But based on what I know, there are kind of 3 buckets that I'm thinking. The first, I'm going to call them the fit millennial. The second, I'm going to call hardworking parent. And the third is going to be B2B. So I can go through each of these and just kind of go through like their journey a little bit, just so I can kind of explain like how I kind of thought about like this user. So the first, like the fit millennial, you know, this is somebody who, you know, might work in, I don't know, like their tech job. They might live in a city and, you know, they are commuting, maybe if we're assuming pre-pandemic, yeah, like they were commuting, and, you know, they really need it. They are very careful about like, you know, their health, and they work out maybe Barry's boot camp. And also at the same time, you know, they're noticing like they're not getting the gains that they want. And so they're thinking, okay, might need to get some like nutritional help. And like, it seems kind of old school to go find like a nutritionist at the doctor. And so they're thinking, okay, I would use like an application for this. So that's kind of one persona I'm thinking. The second persona is, you know, this hardworking parent. And this is someone who, you know, maybe has a few kids and they've kind of recently been, you know, stressed, taking care of all their family members, and, or not recently, I guess, being a parent, you're always kind of stressed taking care of your family members, and kind of went to the doctor to do your annual checkup. And they're kind of saying, okay, you need to, you know, kind of get your health in check. You have high cholesterol, and you need to figure out how to lower that. So they're kind of like recently kind of trying to get into, you know, managing their health again and taking charge of that. I think the last persona to kind of chat about is like this B2B one. I think it's always interesting to see applications for like selling to other businesses, you know, potentially like MyFitnessPal. I don't know actually if they existingly have customers with like other startups, but like when I think about like meditation apps, you know, they have like services where that you can like pay for the employees to use it, and there's a lot of benefits. Like maybe MyFitnessPal, you know, they care about, you know, improving the health of their employees, or companies care about the health of the employees, and MyFitnessPal is a way to kind of get there. So I think these are 3 interesting personas. I might take a second to kind of think about, what user persona might make sense. But, if there's any that are jumping out to you as well, like let me know if we want to take it in a certain direction.
No, I'll leave it to you to decide like what would be most impactful.
Okay, cool. I might take a second to kind of think about the selection, but I think when I'm thinking about maybe I'll just talk through it with you. The way that I think about, selecting a user persona is kind of like, kind of in like maybe three buckets. Like the first is, we're going to want to pick a sizable market. So out of these three groups, kind of figuring out, which one is, I guess, a big enough market for us to tackle. But I don't think that's the only constraint in a way. Like I think we also need to think about, I think the second point is like the importance of health in someone's life. MyFitnessPal is a health related app. I think we also need to take into consideration, how much are they going to prioritize this? Because then I think that will also lead to engagement of the actual application. And I think the third selection is kind of experience / affinity with tech, because we are talking about an app, MyFitnessPal. So whatever we come up with is going to have, it's most likely going to be like tech related, unless we come up with some physical products. But otherwise, I think it's important that our user is kind of falling under one of these three buckets. So I do think that, I guess working my way backwards, so B2B, I think there is a tremendous opportunity, and I think there is an opportunity to monetize potentially because like, businesses might pay for this, but our main goal is engagement. And so I'm not sure if, selling to another company, if that is the move for right now. And I don't know if it's actually a main market for them. So I think that's one to maybe consider potentially later, but not most immediately. Between hardworking parent and fit millennial, I'd say that both are kind of similar, I guess, market sizes. I think importance of health in one's life. I see that the millennial, it seems like they might prioritize it more just because they are maybe at a younger age where, their bodies are kind of like they have more time, and like, they might care more about like their physique and nutrition at that point, versus a hardworking parent has so many other priorities that the importance of health might not immediately be there unless it's something very severe. In that case, you probably wouldn't go to MyFitnessPal, you'd go to some other solution. So I think it's based off of that, and the fact that I think millennials are already more used to, using applications more potentially than someone who maybe might be in an older state. I think maybe you want to start with the millennials, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm following so far.
Okay, awesome. So I think now that we've chosen, fit millennial, we want to think about an engaging experience for them. I think being a PM of MyFitnessPal, I think I kind of need to think about, some of the pain points that these millennials are facing. And we already talked about some previously that even I was facing. So maybe I can kind of loop maybe some of that in here. So I might take a second to just come up with a couple, if that works. Cool. Okay. Okay. So I think the 3 pain points that I'm thinking, I'll just kind of name them at first, and then we can go through each of them in more detail. So the first one's around, the education, second is diversity, and then the third is the manual aspect of MyFitnessPal. I think the first, an education pain point, I think this is something that's even bigger than MyFitnessPal, is literally just not understanding, nutrition. I don't think that's something that people really learn in school. I mean, I learned it, I think, in like a life health class, but I can't remember anything about it. And so I think the education aspect is a big pain point that users have to overcome, is like literally teaching themselves how to properly manage their own nutrition, their foods. And there's a lot of like conflicting things out there as to, should I have more fat? Should I have more carbs? So it's just a very like kind of intimidating space. And I think that, MyFitnessPal could potentially be like, solving one of these pain points a little bit better. So I think from the education perspective, that's something that's a friction maybe with this group of, folks who maybe, just graduated college and / a little bit beyond, and kind of like the issues with that. The second pain point around diversity, this one is this one's kind of what I mentioned a bit earlier in our conversation, and how like, there might not be enough like ethnic foods like kind of on there, or you're trying, or you don't even know yourself, how to find like the ingredients in some of these like complex like recipes. The third is kind of around the manual process to manage health, and that like, you've seen people when they are like, well, at least I have seen people when they're like trying to do like weights in the gym, they have to like write everything down, and it's very manual. And it's like, this is another aspect of like the whole nutrition health process that also has a lot of friction. You have to add things line by line item, and it makes your health journey even more difficult. So I think out of all three of these pain points, I think it's important that we, choose one that seems to be the most critical need for the user, because I think once we determine what's the primary need for these users, we could eventually figure out how we can find some solutions to that, which in turn will create that kind of engaging experience, which is like our primary goal. So I can kind of go through figuring out of these three, which one is the most critical, if that works. We can go through that, or let me know if you want to jump somewhere else. Okay.
No, that makes sense.
Cool. I think from the first one about the education piece, I think that I actually need a minute to kind of think about this one, and then I think I'll circle back.
Okay.
Okay, I think for the educational pain point, it seems like this is something that kind of comes, I think, before you're even thinking about, managing your food in a way. Like, I think potentially MyFitnessPal is already kind of set up for users who already have like the intent to manage their health journey. And so I think the education portion might not be like primary for them to manage, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like there are a lot of resources that like, I think people these days can literally learn about anything going on YouTube. They can go on TikTok, they can go on, they follow like Instagram, like health folks. So I think the education portion might not be the most immediate one for MyFitnessPal to solve, just because there are a lot more competitors that, and more resources out there. So I don't know if that's the most immediate pain point for us. As for the diverse recipes, while personally I would like love if MyFitnessPal stepped up here, I think that thinking about, just like a general fit millennial user, they probably can find other options out there, like ones like that are more niche. Like there are like websites that have like specific recipes for like an ethnic group, and specific ways to, I don't know, probably track your macros through it. So I think if like a user is looking for, the diversity itself, they'll go and find it versus going to like a generic place, like a more generic place like MyFitnessPal. I think the pain point that's still the most friction, that has the most friction, is the manual process of managing health. Like that, like literally the experience is adding things line by line. Like if we could solve that and make it somehow so seamless for users to like add their food and for them to track it, we could really kind of make a difference and like move probably the engagement needle. So let me know if it makes sense to focus on the third pain point, and kind of like come up with some solutions.
No, that makes sense. It's sort of like based on other sources and like, I guess, alternatives. Let's focus on this one. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because I do know like we want to think about, the pain points that make sense for also like MyFitnessPal to tackle, and like I guess like what is even like the kind of like the share of this. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll take a second to kind of think about some solutions, maybe some that are more reasonable, some that are more out of the box. Who knows how much budget we will have for this, but I think it's good to think about, the best experience and like the one that we could probably accomplish in 6 months. So I'm gonna take a second to kind of think about that, if that works. So I kind of have three ideas. The first is I'm going to call it a food planner, where basically what I'm imagining is like a user can maybe like enter or select different foods they like. Like maybe I love burritos, I love dim sum, I love tacos. So it's kind of like gauging what I like to eat, and like potentially maybe it surfaces a recipe or services like popular, dishes like, I don't know, like Chipotle. And so essentially from this state, like the user it's like less friction. There's less friction because the user can basically either just use a recipe or use like restaurants nearby where MyFitnessPal has already kind of like logged like the nutritional content. And so that's already kind of like inputted there. So I think this potentially takes away some of, some of the friction point of like actually deciding what you want to eat. But I think it could be potentially limiting for people who like to cook all their food, and like this might not work out very well for them if they don't like the recipe surfaced or the local restaurants surfaced on this. But just a risk I want to point out. The second solution I'm thinking of is I'm kind of thinking of I think chat experiences are becoming more and more common these days, where you can chat with a bot. I'm gonna call it like maybe like a bot check-in, where you can send a message to a bot or it checks in how are you doing, like how's your mental health, how's your physical health. But basically for this scenario, I'm imagining like the bot check-in will kind of be like, hey, what'd you eat today? And you can just respond, be like, hey, I got a salad at Sweet Green. So essentially it's kind of like more of a conversational experience that people are more and more used to. And this way a user doesn't have to manually do selections. They can kind of just get a small reminder, kind of respond to this bot to say, hey, I had this for lunch, this for dinner. The bot can kind of do the analysis on the back end and already kind of populate, what the user ate. Let me know if that one was clear. I kind of did a roundabout way of doing it, but that's kind of okay, great. I'm gonna call it the bot check-in solution. And then the third solution I'm thinking of is I'm gonna call it the food camera analyzer. So what I'm imagining is you have your lunch in front of you, basically open up the MyFitnessPal camera it now has, and you basically just take a picture of your food, the camera, and use this AI machine learning to kind of analyze, okay, I can see some green beans on your plate, some mashed potatoes, and some turkey because it's Thanksgiving. And it's gonna kind of be able to size what is the nutritional content. And I think this could potentially be more seamless for users, who this fit millennial probably might have a food Instagram. And so they're already used to taking a ton of photos. And then the camera or the machine will basically do the analysis on its end to determine the food that's in it. So out of these three solutions, I think it's important I think that they each solve something for the user, but I think we need to think about, I think one is this solving our business goal, which is engagement. Two, is this adequately solving our pain point, which is, it's manual to manage your health. And three, we probably need to take into account eng constraints as well, just because, MyFitnessPal doesn't have hundreds of thousands of engineers. So it's anything that we build, we're gonna have to make sure we can adequately support it in a way. So I think out of all three of these, I think the food planner one, I don't know if it actually takes the best interest of the users, and the fact that I feel like it works with a subset of this fit millennial user of people who want to see recipes and want to be recommended restaurants, but there's a whole lot of people that they have their own plans of food and managing their nutrition. And so I think it kind of limits the actual user group in a way. So I'd say the food planner one might not be the solution to pursue immediately. Between bot check-in and food camera analyzer, I would say that from the pain point perspective of the manualness of it, I would say that the camera one is less manual in the fact that you have to just take one picture. The bot check-in, you do have to probably text it, or it requires more of texting and maybe some more back and forth. So I think from that perspective, the user's pain point's more solved from the food camera analyzer. I will just notice maybe one of the risks of the camera analyzer is privacy, because you're taking photos. So that is kind of something to think about. And I think from an eng perspective, I'd say both kind of require, using ML AI. So I'd say they're kind of on parity with kind of the eng needed. So I'd say like maybe medium, kind of like medium for that. But I think ultimately with a business goal of engagement, I'd say thinking about this user and kind of going back to the fact that, they're more used to, taking photos of things. This one might be a more engaging and more intuitive experience for them. So I'd say the food camera analyzer might be the solution to pursue. Whether this is accomplishable in 6 months, TBD. But I think it's like we can definitely get an MVP out for then. Yeah.
Cool. That makes sense. And so I guess the last question I have is, given the 6-month time frame, assuming we go for this camera solution, how might you constrain the problem so that we could make sure we achieve it in that time frame?
Sure. Like what we can do to basically like what the MVP would kind of look like. Is that
yeah, like how might we scope it down? To make the problem smaller.
Got it. Okay. Let me think about that. And get it to like a more releasable version in the 6-month period. Okay. I think the way to kind of go about this is, I think when you're releasing kind of like a feature, you kind of need to understand how you're going to release it. So I think the first is probably like piloting it with a subset of users, maybe like 1% of users. So like working off a small group and seeing how they respond to it first, and kind of like getting feedback from them, like maybe like even calling it like a beta feature, like early access feature. So they know it might be a little bit janky, but it's like the purpose is to collect a lot of data. As for the way that we're actually going to be like analyzing this, I think it's going to take a lot of time probably to like get the model to work with like all types of foods out there. So maybe we kind of need to start off with the machine just identifying like more commonly more, I guess, like identifying foods that probably are more popular. Like when you think about like lunch dishes, like pastas, or like, even McDonald's burgers, like even if it can like detect like brand names, like if you can see that like within the scope of the image, that's also going to be something that will help the machine learn faster. Ideally, like the end state, you want it to be able to see like, I don't know, like a chicken dish, like an ethnic chicken dish, and to be able to determine, what is within it. But I think we might have to start off with, the machine building off of more common things. And if it's unable to detect it, we're going to have to kind of figure out, what's going to be like the fail state for something like that. But I think by setting the expectation for the users in the beginning that this is like some early access or beta product, people will be excited and more forgiving in a way to use it.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a ton of sense. So I think that's everything I wanted to ask you for this. So let's pause here. I was taking notes the whole time, but before we get there, do you have any like self-feedback for the question?
Yeah, I think the way that I approached the problem, I think the beginning portion made sense of like, like figuring out, why a product is a poor experience. I think the portion that I think I could maybe think a little bit deeper on is I think the user personas, like potentially maybe I could like learn more about other personas that maybe aren't as intuitive, maybe somebody who is like blind and wants to use this and like track their nutrition. So maybe I could have come up with maybe some more diverse user personas. That was something that I was thinking about doing. And I think as for the actual solutions, as I kind of went through them, I kind of realized they all seem a little bit complex. So maybe there was like a simpler kind of middle step I could have like come up with as well. That was just something I kind of noticed. I kind of had like 2 AI related products that seemed actually a bit complex, but I think would solve the goal. So that was something that I thought about.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, thanks for the self-feedback. It's always nice to hear like what you're thinking. So what I wrote down, I thought what you did well was not only did you tell me like why we were doing things, but you also told me why we are not doing other things. Because in real life, you're in a meeting, you're like, hey, like I think we should do this. Someone's always going to ask you, well, why not that? So I thought that was like realistic and like very clear. I think another thing you did well was it was easy to follow like how everything you were saying was related back to the original pain points and then back to the original North Star metric that we had identified. So that was really awesome. I agree with your self-feedback around the personas. I felt sometimes the pain points weren't like necessarily exclusive to the millennial, like it maybe could have touched the parent, for example. And then the other bit of feedback was just the last follow-up question I asked. It's like, okay, like that's a really like potentially impactful but complicated thing. How might we like scope it down for the 6 months? But overall, like you did a great job. And thanks for joining today. Anything to add before we wrap up?
No, I think this all made sense. I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. Well, thanks again for joining. And for those watching, good luck on your upcoming interview.